The question came out so quietly that for a moment the entire room seemed to stop breathing. "Will we sleep in the same bed?" The single dad immediately regretted saying it. His ears burned with embarrassment. He wasn't trying to be rude or strange, he was simply a tired father who had spent years doing everything alone. Across from him sat a powerful CEO, a woman known in the city for her billion-dollar decisions and sharp business mind. People feared her in boardrooms. Yet at that moment, she was looking at a little girl standing beside the man. The girl held tightly to her father's hand. They had arrived at the large house after a long, desperate day. The father had lost his job months ago, and when the rain flooded their tiny apartment that morning, they had nowhere left to go. The CEO had only meant to help them for one night. But the father's question wasn't about comfort. It was about safety. His daughter had nightmares. Ever since her mother passed away 2 years ago, she refused to sleep alone. Wherever they stayed, shelters, friends' couches, cheap motels, she always clung to him through the night. The CEO looked at the child's nervous eyes. For the first time in years, something softened inside her heart. She slowly knelt down to the little girl's level and smiled gently. "No," she said softly. The father's face fell with embarrassment. Then she continued, "You won't need to." She stood, walked to the hallway, and opened another bedroom door. "Because starting tonight," she said, "this house is your home too." The father stood frozen in the hallway, unsure if he had heard her correctly. This is our home?" he asked carefully, almost afraid the words might disappear if he spoke too loudly. The CEO nodded calmly. "For as long as you need," she said. The little girl looked up at her father with wide, hopeful eyes. "Daddy, does that mean we can stay?" she whispered. For months the man had tried to stay strong for his daughter. He worked every job he could find, slept in uncomfortable places, and hid his worries behind forced smiles. But at that moment, standing in a warm house with a safe bed waiting, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Relief. "Thank you," he said quietly, his voice shaking. The CEO watched them carefully. She had built companies, negotiated massive deals, and faced ruthless competitors. Yet nothing in her world had ever looked quite like this simple moment of gratitude. The little girl slowly stepped forward. "Are you rich?" she asked innocently. The CEO couldn't help but laugh softly. "Some people say I am." The child tilted her head thoughtfully. "Then why are you helping us?" The question surprised her. For years she had been surrounded by people who cared only about money, success, and power. But no one had asked her something so simple, and so honest. She paused for a moment before answering. "Because someone helped me once," she said gently. The father looked at her, curious. The CEO leaned against the doorway and added quietly, "A long time ago, I was a girl who also needed a safe place to sleep." The little girl smiled. And suddenly the big house felt warmer than it ever had before. The little girl's smile seemed to light up the quiet hallway. "Then you know how it feels," she said softly. The CEO nodded. "Yes, I do." She led them into the bedroom she had opened earlier. It was simple but comfortable, a soft bed, warm blankets, and a small lamp glowing beside the window. To the father and his daughter, it felt like a palace. The girl ran her hand across the blanket. "Daddy, it's so soft," she whispered with amazement. Her father smiled, but inside he felt a strange mix of gratitude and worry. Kindness like this didn't happen often in his world. People usually expected something in return. He turned to the CEO. "I promise we won't stay long," he said quickly. "Just until I find work again." But the CEO shook her head gently. "You don't need to rush," she replied. "Everyone deserves time to stand back up." Her words carried a quiet understanding that surprised him. Meanwhile, the little girl climbed onto the bed and looked between the two adults. "Daddy," she asked innocently, "does this mean we're not homeless anymore?" The father's throat tightened. Before he could answer, the CEO spoke softly. "No," she said kindly. "It means you're safe." The little girl seemed to relax instantly. For the first time that day, her small shoulders dropped as if a heavy weight had been lifted. She looked at the CEO again. "Do you live here all alone?" the girl asked. The woman paused. For a moment, the powerful CEO who commanded boardrooms looked unexpectedly quiet. "Yes," she admitted. The girl thought about that for a second, then said something that made both adults freeze. "That sounds lonely. That sounds lonely." The words were simple, but they landed heavily in the quiet room. For a moment, the CEO didn't know how to respond. No employee had ever spoken to her that way. No business partner had ever dared. In her world, people admired her success, respected her power, and sometimes even feared her, but no one had ever looked at her with simple concern. Except this little girl. The CEO gave a small smile. "Sometimes it is," she admitted. The father shifted awkwardly. "I'm sorry, she asks a lot of questions." But the CEO shook her head gently. "No. I like her questions." The little girl sat cross-legged on the bed, thinking very seriously. "Well," she said after a moment, "you don't have to be lonely tonight." Both adults looked at her. She patted the empty space on the bed beside her. "There's room." Her father immediately panicked. "Sweetheart, that's not—" But the CEO suddenly laughed, a soft, genuine laugh she hadn't made in years. "It's okay," she said kindly. Then she sat on the edge of the bed beside the child. For a moment, the three of them simply sat there in silence. Outside, the rain continued tapping against the windows, but inside the room something unexpected was happening. The large house that once felt empty and cold now felt alive. The CEO looked at the father. "You asked earlier if you'd have to sleep in the same bed," she said gently. He nodded awkwardly. "Well," she continued with a small smile, "tonight you'll sleep in the guest room, and your daughter will be safe." The father's eyes filled with quiet gratitude. But the little girl wasn't finished yet. She looked at the CEO and asked another surprising question. "Will you stay for breakfast tomorrow? Will you stay for breakfast tomorrow?" The little girl asked the question as if it were the most natural thing in the world. The CEO blinked in surprise. For years, her mornings had been the same: early meetings, endless emails, and rushed coffee while reviewing reports. Breakfast was usually eaten alone, quickly, if she ate at all. But this invitation felt different. She looked at the child's hopeful face and smiled. "Yes," she said softly. "I think I will." The little girl clapped her hands happily. "Then it's settled." Her father chuckled nervously. "You see? She likes making plans for everyone." But the CEO didn't seem bothered. In fact, something about the girl's cheerful confidence made the house feel lighter. Soon, it was time for the little girl to sleep. She curled under the warm blanket, still holding her father's hand. Before closing her eyes, she looked at the CEO again. "Thank you for letting us stay," she whispered. The CEO gently tucked the blanket around her. "You're welcome," she replied quietly. Within minutes, the child was asleep. The father stood beside the bed, watching his daughter breathe peacefully. It had been a long time since he had seen her sleep without fear. He turned to the CEO. "You didn't just give us a place to stay tonight," he said softly. "You gave her peace." The CEO looked at the sleeping girl for a moment. Then she spoke words that surprised even herself. "Maybe," she said gently, "you gave something to me too." For the first time in years, the house didn't feel empty. And sometimes, the smallest acts of kindness create the biggest changes in the human heart.